What if the cup of coffee you've been drinking every single morning is doing something to your arteries that your doctor has never mentioned to you? Not something you can feel, not something that shows up overnight, but a slow, quiet process happening right now inside the walls of your blood vessels that most people over 60 are completely unaware of. And here's what makes this even more interesting. The science on coffee has completely reversed itself in the last 20 years. What we used to warn people about, researchers are now looking at in a completely different light. But, and this is the part almost nobody talks about, two people can drink the exact same cup of coffee every single morning and end up with completely different results inside their bodies. Why? That's exactly what we're going to answer today. Stay with me, because by the time we're done, you're going to look at your morning coffee in a way you never have before. Let's start with something that doesn't get talked about enough. What actually happens inside your arteries as you age? Most of us think about aging from the outside, the wrinkles, the gray hair, the slower recovery after a long day. But while those changes are happening on the surface, there are far more important changes happening beneath it. Changes that are completely silent, completely invisible, and yet completely critical to how long and how well you live. Think about a garden hose that's brand new. It's flexible. It bends easily. The water flows through it without any resistance. Now imagine that same hose after 10 years in the sun and cold and constant pressure. It starts to stiffen. The walls get harder. A hard squeeze might even crack it. That's a rough picture of what happens to your arteries over time. When you're young, the walls of your arteries are elastic. With every heartbeat, they expand and contract, absorbing the force of the blood moving through them. But as the decades pass, that elasticity slowly decreases. The walls become less pliable, and the heart has to work a little harder to push blood through. Now here's the part that most people have never heard explained clearly. Inside every artery, lining the very innermost surface, there's a microscopic layer called the endothelium. You don't need to remember that name. What you need to remember is what it does. Think of it like the non-stick coating inside a good frying pan. When it's intact, nothing sticks to it. Blood flows through cleanly, smoothly, without anything building up on the walls. But when that inner lining starts to get damaged from high blood pressure, from excess sugar, from chronic stress, from years of poor sleep, it begins to lose that protective quality. Tiny areas start to become inflamed. The surface gets rougher. And slowly, over time, fat, cholesterol, and calcium can begin to accumulate where they shouldn't be. This is what doctors call atherosclerosis. It's a complicated word for a relatively simple idea. The arteries are losing their ability to stay clean and flexible. And the most alarming thing about it? It almost never hurts. There's no pain in the early stages, no obvious symptoms, no alarm going off. People feel fine, completely fine, while this process is already underway. Have you ever known someone who seemed healthy right up until they weren't? That's not bad luck. That's often the result of these silent changes that went undetected for years. And that's exactly why what you do every single day matters so much after 60. Not one big decision, hundreds of small ones, including what you drink every morning. So, where does coffee fit into all of this? For years, the message was simple. Coffee is bad for your heart. It raises your blood pressure. People over 60 should cut back or quit entirely. Maybe someone told you that. Maybe you felt guilty every time you poured yourself a cup. But the science has moved, and it's moved significantly. Inside a single cup of coffee, there are hundreds of naturally occurring compounds, not just caffeine. Researchers have spent years studying one group in particular, polyphenols and other antioxidant compounds that have measurable effects on the body's inflammatory processes. Let me explain why that matters. As we age, a process called chronic low-grade inflammation becomes one of the biggest hidden threats to cardiovascular health. Unlike the inflammation you see when you sprain your ankle, red, swollen, painful, this type of inflammation is invisible. It's quiet, but it's constant, and it slowly degrades the tissues it touches, including the inner lining of your arteries. Think of it like a slow leak in the walls of your house. You don't see the water, but every day it's weakening the structure a little more. The antioxidant compounds found in coffee appear to help neutralize some of that damage. They interact with the endothelium, that inner lining we talked about, in ways that may help it maintain its function better over time. Several large-scale studies conducted over the last 2 decades have found that people who consume moderate amounts of coffee tend to show more favorable cardiovascular markers than those who don't drink it at all. And I want to be careful with how I say that, because this is where a lot of health content goes wrong. Coffee is not a medicine. It cannot undo decades of poor lifestyle choices. It is not going to dissolve plaque, lower your blood pressure on its own, or replace any treatment your doctor has recommended. What the research suggests is simply that, within the context of an otherwise reasonable lifestyle, moderate coffee consumption may be one of many small factors that helps protect arterial health over time. But here's the part most people overlook. The benefits don't live in the coffee alone. They live in the combination, the context, the full picture of how and when and with what you drink that cup. And that brings us to the part of this conversation that I think is the most valuable of all. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Robert. He was 68 years old, retired, and genuinely trying to take care of himself. He walked 4 days a week, didn't smoke, and kept a close eye on what he ate. When he came in for a routine check, his blood pressure had climbed and his cardiovascular markers weren't where either of us wanted them to be. His first instinct? It must be the coffee. I've been drinking 2 cups every morning for 40 years. Sound familiar? When I asked him to walk me through his entire morning routine, a different picture emerged. He was sleeping 5.5 hours a night, had been for months. He was waking up exhausted and using those 2 cups of coffee to push through the fatigue. Each cup had 2 spoonfuls of sugar, and his breakfast, most mornings, was a packaged pastry he grabbed on the way out the door. So I asked him a simple question. Are we sure the coffee is the problem? He didn't answer right away, because for the first time he was considering the possibility that he'd been blaming the wrong thing. We worked on his sleep, we worked on the sugar, we shifted his breakfast, and over time his numbers began to move in the right direction, without him giving up his morning coffee at all. I'm not telling you that story to say coffee is always innocent. I'm telling it because it perfectly illustrates the single most important concept in this entire conversation. It is rarely one thing. Health, and the health of your arteries especially, is built from patterns, not individual choices. Now let's talk about the 5 most common mistakes I see people over 60 making with their morning coffee. And I want to go through these in order, from the one that causes the least damage to the one I consider the most important. The 5th mistake is adding multiple spoonfuls of sugar to every cup, every day. I know this is a deeply ingrained habit for many people. Coffee without sugar can seem like a completely different experience if you've been adding it for 50 years. But here's the contradiction worth thinking about. Many people are drinking coffee specifically because they've heard it may be good for their heart, and then adding a substance that works against cardiovascular health with every cup. Refined sugar, consumed daily in significant amounts, contributes to exactly the kind of low-grade inflammation we talked about earlier. Each spike in blood glucose triggers a cascade of responses in the body, and over time, repeated daily exposure to those spikes begins to affect the very arterial lining that coffee's antioxidants might otherwise help protect. A small amount occasionally is not catastrophic, but a habit, 2 or 3 spoonfuls twice a day, every day for years, adds up to something that matters. If there's one change to try first, it's this. Reduce the sugar gradually, over a few weeks. Many people find that their taste adjusts and eventually they prefer it without. The 4th mistake is pairing coffee with heavily processed, sugar-laden foods every morning. A pastry, a packaged muffin, a sweetened biscuit. These foods are incredibly common breakfast companions, and they're rarely thought of as problematic because they're eaten in small quantities. But your body doesn't receive your coffee in isolation. It receives everything you consume in that morning window together, as one combined signal. After 60, the body's ability to regulate blood sugar tends to be somewhat less efficient than it was at 30 or 40. The combination of caffeine and a high-sugar processed food can create a more pronounced blood glucose response than either would alone. And when that happens every morning, you're starting each day with a small inflammatory event inside your circulatory system. A better approach? Pair your coffee with something that gives your body something useful. A handful of mixed nuts, a boiled egg, some berries, avocado on whole grain bread. These aren't exotic choices. They're practical ones, and they change the entire metabolic context of that morning cup. The 3rd mistake is using coffee as a substitute for sleep. This one is underappreciated, And I think it's because coffee works so well in the short term. You're tired, you have a cup, you feel better. It seems like a solution. But caffeine doesn't replace sleep. It temporarily blocks the receptors in your brain that signal fatigue, but the fatigue is still building up underneath. The repair processes that happen during deep sleep, the cellular maintenance, the cardiovascular recovery, the hormonal regulation, none of those are happening when you're awake, no matter how many cups of coffee you drink. And after 60, sleep becomes one of the most underrated protectors of cardiovascular health. Research shows consistently that people who sleep fewer than 6 hours a night have significantly higher rates of arterial stiffness, elevated blood pressure, and inflammatory markers. Using coffee to compensate for that lost sleep might help you function during the day, but it doesn't address the underlying cost to your arteries. If you're relying on 3 or 4 cups of coffee just to feel like yourself in the morning, that's a signal worth paying attention to. The second mistake is believing that more coffee means more benefit. This is completely logical thinking. If moderate amounts show positive associations, surely more would show greater ones. But that's not how the body works. Most of the research on coffee and cardiovascular health suggests that the favorable associations appear in the range of 2 to 3 cups per day for most people. Beyond that, the benefits plateau, and for some individuals, the risks begin to shift. Disrupted sleep, elevated heart rate, anxiety, increased blood pressure. Everyone's tolerance is different. Some people process caffeine slowly due to genetic differences in their liver enzymes, meaning caffeine lingers in their system for many more hours than it does in someone else. For those people, an afternoon cup can significantly disrupt sleep, even if they don't feel it directly at the time. If you're enjoying this video and finding it useful, this is a great moment to subscribe and join our community here on The Healthy Body. We put out content exactly like this every week, practical, research-based health information for people who want to live their best years ahead with confidence. Hit that subscribe button and don't miss what's coming next. The first mistake, the most important one, and the one I see most often, is ignoring what your body is already trying to tell you. This is the error that undoes everything else. People spend enormous energy searching for the perfect food, the perfect supplement, the perfect morning routine, while completely ignoring the signals their own body is sending them. Blood pressure creeping up over the last year, frequent heart palpitations that come and go, sleep that keeps getting shorter and more fragmented, a fatigue that doesn't lift no matter how much coffee you drink. These are not random inconveniences, these are communications. After 60, your body communicates differently than it did at 40. The signals can be subtler. They can be easier to dismiss. But they're also more important to listen to, because the window for early intervention is more valuable now than it's ever been. No beverage, no matter how many antioxidants it contains, is a substitute for a medical evaluation when your body is sending you signals. The wisest investment you can make in your cardiovascular health isn't finding the perfect cup of coffee. It's staying in regular contact with a healthcare provider who can help you interpret what's happening before a quiet problem becomes a loud one. Where are you chatting from? Drop it in the comments section. And while you're there, tell me, do you drink your coffee black, with milk, or are you still adding sugar? I genuinely want to know, and I read as many of your comments as I can. So what does all of this actually look like in practice? If you're someone over 60 who enjoys coffee and wants to keep enjoying it thoughtfully, here's how to think about it. First, pay attention to how your body responds to coffee specifically. This sounds obvious, but most people have never actually done it consciously. Do you sleep well on the nights after drinking coffee? Does your heart rhythm feel normal? Do you feel calm and focused, or restless and anxious? Your personal response is the most important data point, more important than any general guideline. Second, timing matters more after 60. Caffeine has a half-life of roughly 5 to 6 hours in most people, meaning half of the caffeine from a 2 p.m. cup is still circulating in your system at 8 p.m. After 60, some people find that their caffeine sensitivity has increased, meaning it affects them more than it used to. A simple experiment. Move your last cup to noon for 2 weeks and see if your sleep quality improves. The results can be surprising. Third, if you can reduce or eliminate the added sugar, do it gradually. Cut back by half a spoonful per week. Your taste buds adjust faster than you'd expect. After 3 or 4 weeks, many people find they actually prefer the flavor of unsweetened coffee. They'd just forgotten what it tasted like. Fourth, think of your coffee as part of a breakfast, not a replacement for one. What surrounds that cup in the morning shapes how your body responds to it. This doesn't require a dramatic overhaul of your routine, just a small shift toward including something nutritious alongside the coffee. And fifth, perhaps the most important of all, don't let coffee be the thing you obsess over while ignoring the bigger factors. Sleep quality, physical movement, stress levels, blood pressure monitoring. These are the pillars. Coffee is a detail, potentially a very pleasant and even beneficial detail, but a detail nonetheless. Let me leave you with something that I come back to with patience time and again, because it reframes the entire conversation. Two people, both 65 years old, both drinking 1 cup of coffee every morning. From the outside, they look like they're doing the same thing, but inside, their bodies are living completely different stories. The first person sleeps 7 hours a night. They walk for 30 minutes most days. They manage their stress with some intentionality. Their blood pressure is checked regularly. They drink their coffee as part of a morning that sets a healthy tone for the day. The second person sleeps 5 hours. They sit for most of the day. They're under chronic stress they've stopped noticing because it's been constant for so long. They're using coffee to run on empty. And every morning that cup sits surrounded by habits that are steadily working against them. The coffee is the same. The outcomes won't be. That's the insight I want you to carry with you from this video. Not fear about coffee, not guilt about your morning ritual. Just a clearer understanding that the question is never just, is this food or drink good or bad for me? The real question is, what kind of life is surrounding this choice? Because here's what I know after many years in health and wellness. The body has a remarkable capacity to respond when we start treating it better. The changes don't have to be enormous to be meaningful. A little more sleep, a little less sugar, a walk added to the afternoon. These small decisions, stacked consistently, build something real over time. You are not too late. The arterial system is more responsive than most people realize, even after 60. The choices you make starting this week will have a measurable impact on your cardiovascular health in the months and years ahead. So tomorrow morning, when you pour your cup of coffee, pause for just a second and ask yourself, what else am I giving my body today? That question, asked honestly and regularly, might be more powerful than any supplement, any superfood, or any health trend you've ever come across. I'm Dr. David, and this is The Healthy Body, a channel dedicated to giving you honest, practical, research-informed health education that actually helps you live better. If this video was useful to you, please share it with someone you care about. A family member, a friend, anyone over 60 who starts their day with a cup of coffee and deserves to understand what's really going on inside their body. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Join our community, because every week we dive deep into topics exactly like this one. The quiet, overlooked factors that shape your health in ways you may never have been told. Subscribe, turn on the notifications, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Take care of your arteries. And remember, it's never too late to start.